Welcome to another enlightening episode of Inner Peace, Better Health, the podcast where we explore the profound connections between mental well being and overall health. I am your host, Arick, and today we have a truly remarkable guest with us, Phyllis Leavitt. Phyllis is a seasoned psychotherapist with over 34 years of experience, an author, and a passionate advocate for healing both individuals and our nation. Her latest book, America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis, delves into the urgent need for collective healing. Phyllis, it's an absolute honor to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me here with you. And I feel just as honored to be having this conversation.
Likewise, Phyllis, likewise. So let's dive right into it with a very big question. Phyllis, you have a rich background in psychology. How do you see the intersection of psychology and spirituality playing a role in healing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big issue. I'm a psychotherapist, obviously, and I've done a lot of psychotherapy myself as the client and a lot of healing work myself from some
Uh-huh.
significant trauma in my own childhood. And at the same time, starting at a very early age, I had spiritual experiences that I had no language for. I had profound connection to nature that was beyond the human. It was otherworldly in
Okay.
terms of the depth of divine love that I felt coming and experienced with Mother Earth. And I had other experiences that were just inexplicable, where I connected to a
Mm.
source of divine love that was just really a gift to me. And some of that actually came through writing. Writing seemed to be my spiritual connection to a very deep part of myself, and didn't always work, but
Yes,
but
sir.
I pursued writing because it was such a profound connection for me. But where I see the intersection, and again, it's a huge topic, so we can maybe touch the tip of it today. But where I see the intersection is that as I got older, the most profound spiritual experiences I had always led me back to the places where I needed healing on a psychological, emotional, very personal human level. And that was a
Yeah.
consistent theme. So it was almost like the light lit up the darkness. And I never
Yeah.
understood that when I was younger, because I thought, how could the light not stay? Why am I plunged back into, and really what it was for me for a long time was emotional and physical memories, but without any visuals. So for a long time, I felt kind of crazy. I'm like, what's wrong with me? I can't figure this out. Um,
Yeah.
but long story short, for our purposes today, there are two things that I would accentuate, and then I'm happy to go
Yeah.
wherever you would like to pursue the conversation. The two big things that I would want to share are, one, that as I did my healing work on the traumas of my childhood,
Yeah.
I I made a much more solid connection to spirit. And that just happened.
Yeah.
Kind of, it just, I think I was an opening for it. And I think, we're an opening and spirit has an opening for us. And so as I kept my journal about just my healing process, I actually made connection with a very divine voice that spoke to me and told me what Phyllis Leavitt was doing here with the pain that she had, the gifts that she had, the callings that she had, um, and what we're all doing here as souls in human form, and what this journey is really about. And so
Yeah.
I those are that my first two books, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, are all about this profound spiritual connection that I made that really gave me something that psychology couldn't. And psychology was fabulous. It really helped me understand the dynamics of abuse and neglect and family
Yeah, definitely.
dynamics, early conditioning, but it wasn't the full healing. The full healing was really peeling back the layers enough that I could make this much more essential connection, which I call to my soul, which is really how it occurred for me. So that's one thing. And I've seen that with clients that I've worked with, that as they begin to heal the wounds to their emotional self and their psychological self, for some people, it opens the door to a very deep spiritual connection. And the second big point I make, and then please dive in. The second big point I want to make is I was in a spiritual group when I was in my 20s. And I was always seeking, more spiritual guidance and more connection. And this is before the healing work that I did. But in my early 20s, I was in a spiritual group. We had a spiritual practice. In fact, I was in more than one group. But looking back, what I can see is that with no fault and no blame, we all played out our unresolved emotional wounds with each other. People who had were disempowered from early trauma or early conditioning tended to give their power away to either other people in the group that they thought were more, worthy or more enlightened or whatever, or gave their power away to the guru or the teacher. People who, as a result of their unhealed wounds, wanted that power, became over empowered with other people. So we actually really need to heal our psyches as part of the process of making that connection with spirit. That's my experience. That may not be everybody's experience, but that's my experience, that we play out our wounds everywhere we go. And it's no different in a spiritual group than it is in a business or a family. That's my experience. And so I'm grateful that my spiritual connection kept pointing me back to what needed to be healed in my psychological being.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating, Phyllis. And it sounds like combining these two fields can offer a more holistic approach to healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
for our listeners who might be skeptical about spirituality, how would you suggest they start exploring this intersection?
Yeah, I want to say I don't think there's a one size fits all, and I don't think there should be. I had my own personal path. You have yours, I'm sure, and we each do. And I don't think they're even supposed to be the same. So, what I tapped into with writing and the spiritual connection that I made of actually hearing messages come through my brain and my heart that did not come from me. Was my experience. That's not everybody's experience, nor does it need to be. But I think what the heart is that I was on a quest for the truth. I was on a quest to make a connection with God or soul or being or divine love or whatever word a person puts on it. I wanted that. And that led me in the direction that my particular being was meant to go. Other people might find it in their creativity, in their art, in their love for animals, in working with the climate, in, being peacemakers on an international or local level. I think and this is one of the things I actually learned through my contact with spirit, was that we each have a different path. And part of the problem with unhealed psychology in people is that many people try to impose their path on somebody else. And I think that's a form of psychological violence, actually, against other people. We all have a different role to play. So somebody might find it through singing. They might find it through creating works of art, or they might find it just through being more loving with the people around them. And I think part of what is missing in a lot of the culture that I live in is that honoring of our diversity, whether it's the color of our skin or the religion or the gender that we have, or the way we pursue spirit. I think we need to honor that diversity. So for me, it was a writing process, and I'll share one gift with you. if it's helpful to
Yeah, sure.
anybody in the listening audience, and that is, I was always a writer, from a very young age. And as I said, that was one of the ways I made a spiritual connection. Um, but when I was a little bit older, a friend of mine said, there's a journaling process that she had learned that she shared with me. And that is, you just sit down with your pencil and paper or your computer or however you write, and you just ask a question of your highest self. Just like, why do I feel blocked around my creativity? Or why do I have such difficulty in relationship? Or how can I deal with my child better? Whatever the question is, big or small, that you just ask your higher self to share with you what it has to say. And then you just open and listen. And don't edit anything out, and just write down what you hear. And I did that. And this might not work for everybody, but it definitely does really create an opening for many people. And the very first time I did that, I heard an answer I could not have made up myself. And that has been my experience with writing in connection with this divine source. There's no way I could have received the knowledge that I got through that avenue. And as I said, it's different for different people. So somebody out there listening may not have that experience, but they may have it through meditation or prayer or chanting or communion with nature or their love of children or animals. Or, do you know what I'm saying? Like it comes through
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many
yeah.
sources, and we don't want to judge ourselves I don't want to judge myself if I don't get it the way somebody else gets it. And I don't want to judge them if they don't get it the way I get it.
Mm.
Thoughts,
Yeah.
feelings.
I that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, in your experience, what are some of the most common psychological barriers that prevent people from embracing their spiritual side?
Well, for one thing, I think we have, which is very sad, I think in my culture anyway, and I can't speak for every culture for sure, but in my culture,
Yeah,
the split between spirituality and religion and psychology is very big. They're like two different worlds, and I think that's very unfortunate because I think for many people there isn't even a belief that you could have as an individual person a profound spiritual experience where soul or God or divine love actually comes to
yeah,
meet you where you are in your imperfection, and I will tell you now, I'm a very imperfect human being. I will be on a growth path for the rest of my life. And God and spirit and soul don't care because they don't judge. That level of consciousness is free of judgment. It really is all loving and all wise. And I think we have so much judgment of ourselves that we're not worthy, that we haven't done enough work, that I have to make amends and atone for all my sins. And yes, of course, I want to be a better person. I want to do it better this time than I did it last time. I want to be more aware of how
Mhm.
I treat myself and others. But that that experience of divine love is completely free of judgment. It loves us just the way we are. And because we don't love ourselves just the way we are, and we don't love others just the way they are, and most of us aren't taught that. I mean, I was taught to be judgmental, you know.
Yeah,
Really hard to break through that limitation, and really open the door to something that's divinely loving and wise for all of us. So that's one thing that I think keeps people is just our own self-condemnation and condemnation of
yeah,
others, and holding ourselves to standards of perfection, that most people can't meet, or I have to meditate 10 hours a day, or I can't eat this, or, like really holding, and I'm not saying that there's no value in spiritual practices, because there is. For many, many people, there's a great value in a certain kind of practice and a certain kind of meditation. I've meditated and I know the value of that. But there's also this perfection thing. Like, I can never be angry. I can never be upset. I can blah, blah, blah. Rather than how do we actually embrace our humanity and transform our consciousness by embracing our imperfect humanity? And that's what I learned.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. It's interesting to see how deeply ingrained some of these barriers can be. I
Yes.
imagine that breaking through them can lead to profound personal growth. Wow. So, your book, America in Therapy, addresses national healing. How can the
Yeah.
principles of psychology and spirituality help heal a nation in crisis?
Yeah, so really, that book is all about psychology. It's really not about spirit in the most obvious sense. And in the end, I'll tell you how I think it is about spirit. And we've sort of touched on it. But that book is really about taking the principles. Let me back up and say this. So, as a psychotherapist of over 30 years, working with hundreds of people, individuals, children, couples, families, working with all levels of abuse and neglect in people's childhoods or dysfunctional family dynamics that they're trying to survive and recover from. What I learned is one simple thing. And of course, I've learned many complicated things, but I'm going to share with you the one simple thing. And that is that our deepest wounds, no matter what they look like today, whether it looks like addiction or depression or anxiety or workaholism or rage or reclusiveness or whatever it looks
Yeah,
like, our deepest wounds all stem from some injury with other people to love and safe belonging. And I've never seen that not be true. And so, what we're
okay.
really healing is our injuries to love and safe belonging so that we can have love of ourselves, love with other people, and safe belonging with other people. So, that's the heart of it. And as you're probably very well aware, we don't even talk about such things as part of national agenda. We don't factor such things into our policy making. In fact, and what I
Yeah,
really try to talk about without blame or shame, but really with just speaking truth in my book, is that many of the dynamics in our country and in many countries are actually what we consider abuse dynamics when they happen in families, when one person is targeted for blame and
yeah,
shame, or not given the resources that they need to survive, or they're ostracized, or they're humiliated, or they're physically or sexually or verbally attacked. And we do this
mm,
as part of national policy and practice. So we actually don't provide love and safe belonging, even as a goal. And so I talk about what it would look like for America to see ourselves, and again, not with shame and blame or hatred or anger or any threats of
mm,
violence, to actually be accountable for what we do to one another as policy, as practice, things that we would never want to have be done to ourselves. Nobody wants their children to
right.
be put in a cage. Nobody wants
Yeah,
to not be able to eat or have pay their rent or have their house
yeah,
bought. We don't want these things, but we allow them to be done to other people. And so some of the principles, and I'm really trying to condense a whole lot into a few sentences here. So forgive me if there's some gaps, but
uh-huh.
I talk about, how do we begin to see ourselves as equals? How do we deal with
Mm,
issues of power and control in a way that has respect for other human beings and that we're not just dominating others or taking from them and feeling no remorse for the consequences of our actions? friends? How do we do these things as a country? Because this is what people work on in their own individual lives. How do I become a better partner? How do I become a more understanding parent? How do I create better boundaries? How do I, whether it's boundaries around what I don't want to allow in or boundaries where I don't overstep other people's boundaries? These are all the things that we address in psychology, because these are the things that need to be healed. When we're over empowered and we stomp on other people's voice or rights or bodies, that is an injury to them that creates massive symptoms. So the bottom line, and I'm saying probably too much here, but I'll say one more thing, and then please jump in again.
Yeah.
The bottom line is I become responsible for myself. I stop
Yeah.
blaming you. I stop pointing the finger at you. I can call out bad behavior. I can call out something that's abusive, but I call it out with the desire to heal the relationship or leave it in peace, not to shame, blame, or assault you. And my focus is on, who am I being? Am I speaking to you the way I want you to speak to me? Am I listening to your point of view the way I want you to hear mine? Am I
Yeah.
making amends? Do I make amends? Do I take responsibility and say, that was wrong what I did, or I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, and I'd like to, apologize, and what can I do to make this better? Do I actually desire reconnection, or am I totally willing to just throw you out of my life and then vilify you to other people? These are this level of psychological health and well-being, which really stems from healing whatever wounds set me up to be dysfunctional in my relationships,
Yeah.
is actually the foundation, I believe, for spiritual health. Because if we're playing out our wounds with other people or with ourselves in the name of God, what that ends up being, like religious wars and the Inquisition and religious persecution and excommunicating people from the church. And these are all psychological issues. They're not really spiritual, but we've believed that they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really, 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 really amazing. So you have worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics. How does
Yes.
spirituality play a role in healing from such deep wounds?
Yeah, that's really a very interesting question. And I think many people would answer it from different angles, but I'll speak from my own experience. I think I needed psychological healing to really help heal my relationship to spirit. And I needed my relationship to spirit to help heal my psychological wounds. I think they work together. But I'll say it from the point of view of the second issue, which is, how does spirituality help heal our emotional wounds? I'll just tell you, from my own experience, and this experience also I've witnessed with other people that I've worked with and that I know, is that I think that connection to a totally non what do you call it? It's not just non-judgmental, but it's unconditional love coming through your own heart and your own mind and lighting you up with that deep acceptance. So it's not just that you're forgiven for your, the things that you haven't done so well in your life, but you actually have the experience of knowing that you're more than that. You're more than your imperfections. You're more than your blind spots. And you're even more than your gifts. There's something within us that I believe that we can contact, and I think anybody can do this in their own way, that there is God within us. It's not just God outside us that bestows mercy on us. That God, if you want to say outside of us, and of course, these things aren't really spatial, lights that flame of the God within. And once you know that's there, you know you're more than your most imperfect manifestations. And more than that, I would say, but I think that's the beginning. Because I think our own self judgment and the judgment we heap on other people based on our own self judgment is really in the way of knowing our divine being. And once you have that experience, however you have it in your own way, I think it becomes clearer and clearer for people what their path is in life. For me, it was like my throat chakra just lit up with all of the communication I got from Divine Source. And I knew that my work in the world was to have a voice. My work in the world was to share my experience in my books and try to be of service with what love was bestowed on me. For somebody else, it's going to look completely differently. But I really believe that any kind of, if it's through meditation or prayer or chanting or communion, like I said, with nature, or delving into your art, or just, healing yourself and becoming more loving, however we do it, or maybe it is praying in church. I have nothing against that, or being part of a monastery or an ashram, or anything like that. I have no issue with any of that. We all find our way in our own way. But I really think that once you've begun to make a connection, there's inner guidance about what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And so many people feel lost today. They really don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to make a difference or what their soul really wants from them. And I think that connection to divine spirit, and again, however you do it, really is the real source of that guidance. And yes, you can get some of it from psychological healing as well. And when you put the two together, I think it's magic.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, thank you so much, Phyllis, for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. It's been an enlightening conversation with so much. This conversation had a lot of meat that our listeners and we all could like chew on, and I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot of from it. For those of you tuning in, remember that the intersection of psychology and spirituality can offer profound healing and transformation. If you are interested in diving deeper, be sure to check out Phyllis's book, America in Therapy. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey towards inner peace and better health. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Let's spread the message that healing and transformation are within everyone's reach. Until next time, take care and keep striving for that inner peace and better health.